Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. This is our hidden episode number 84. For those of you who have been following the podcast and are like, hey, where's episode 84 for the last couple months? Well, we have a funny story for you. So we tried our darndest to make sure episode 84 happened. Original topic was kind of around recent features back in, I think this was back in February of when this spectacular show decided to just crash. So my computer had just gotten incredibly angry and continually gotten angrier and angrier with me over the last, I don't know, since throughout January, I would say. And then it just decided to, nope, we're not going to have it. No way to start a stream. We tried multiple times. It wasn't going to work. And we just cut it. We'd like, forget it. We'll figure it out later. So it's later. we're gonna figure it out.
If you're listening to our episodes in order, this one's kind of a time warp ahead.
It's
some
true.
Insights, and then we're playing it backwards. And
yeah, exactly.
This will be a fun little. Hey, we wanted to make sure 100 was actually 100.
Well, let's say
only one of us.
Let's correct this.
Yeah,
Tommy wanted to make sure that 100 was only 100.
I was happy with this being like the 13th floor. Right?
Oh, totally. Yeah,
it's
Me
in
too.
the building, but the elevator never goes there.
Yep.
Or what, the hidden floor. And
100%.
Does that mean they don't like still count all the floor? No, they're
it's
still all there.
There's still 100 floors.
Either way,
13 is not a real floor.
Listen, I may have lost the meme conversation for episode 50. That argument, I was not losing this because it would eat at me if we're celebrating 100, but we all know it's 99.
We know your OCD would kick in, Tommy.
We were there. We were trying to get things working.
Well,
Man, I think it ended. We actually called it after a half hour. Like Mike's,
I was really trying.
Died
like
3 or 4 or 5 times in a row or something like that.
We had a YouTube stream
absurd.
That went for like 7 minutes, and that was about it. That was as far as we could get the YouTube to go before my computer just decided to die. So I don't really know what was happening. I maybe should have gotten some warning signs when things started blue screening throughout. I just basically did a complete computer wipe. I started over. I rebooted everything. I wiped the drive. I started installing, and luckily, I mean, so. This happens, right? I mean, I think now I'm going to have a little routine around my computer. I'll just every year I'll do a little, clean out the drive, start over, do a fresh install every part of the beginning of the year. So that's going to be my spring cleaning. I'll do that for my computer and make sure I get a clean install. So
that was the craziest part. It didn't just like crash the application; it crashed your computer.
And something else was like, I'm convinced at the time there was some edits. Like whenever Teams would update, my computer just seemed to have issues. It was just constant. Like when Teams would do something different, it'd be like, oh, look, there's new features, and then everything would like freak out. I'm like, what the heck is going on? But I'm still not on Windows 11. Are you guys on Windows 11 for your work?
I got auto updated, not for work, but for my personal side computer.
Okay.
It auto updated.
And what'd you think?
Digging it.
Yeah,
like I said,
digging it.
I think I said in episode 97 in the future.
Yeah, in the future.
I haven't said this yet, but I'm going to believe that
the notepad, like the actual black theme in the notepad where I have white text and black. I love it.
All right,
and then like the only major thing that is like most noticeable is everything's going back to rounded edges.
Oh, true.
Yes,
I don't mind. I don't mind the smoother edges. Yeah. There's this what's that design style that's coming across now? It's like this glassy design. Everything's like glass based. Like you have a window and it's like kind of transparent and it kind of like opaques the back image behind it. Like that's like the thing now. Everyone's designing UIs that look like that these days.
It's funny because like it's so normal now to see that in every OS.
Everyone.
And then you remember what was so cool back when like the iPhone first came out, and it was like, what was it called, like real material kind of thing. And everything looked like if it was a leather, like a notepad had, and it looked like real notes. And everyone thought, this is awesome. You see that now, you're like, either this is a spam application,
yes,
like
totally true.
It's amazing how the design changes. But yeah, man, like I had to reset my computer it just recently, depending on what time we're talking about. But I agree with Seth in the future.
Well, and I'll say something here too. I mean, this is a good topic in general of like, what do you do when things just go horribly wrong? I mean, I've been in demos where I've totally botched. You do a lot of planning. You try and plan the sequence of whatever you're trying to do. Click this, click that, click this, click that. Type in this DAX or copy paste this DAX, and you find tricks along the way. I think that goes along with it. But in some cases, stuff just gets angry at you and it will not work, or you can't connect to the internet and stuff is slow. What do you do in those situations?
So we're rebranding this cast to basically when technology dies, how do you cope?
I like
Is
that.
is that kind of the gist of the conversation?
I think it's an appropriate replacement of the previous episode, given our circumstances.
Well, and my wife knows whenever it's going to be that type of day because I'll come upstairs once or twice, say a few choice words. She's like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "There's a fires. I'll handle it. I'll tell you later." And I call them fires, at least on my end, kind of thing.
Fire drills.
Fire drills, because it's when a gateway fails, or it's just a really important day for the business where you're launching something, or what. It's never on a day where it's like, I have nothing going on.
Oh,
And
totally.
because there's always it's the first part. Like, let's take the example with the podcast. Like, okay, why is this failing? And I think for me, it always starts there with these terrible, like, I know people are upset. I know people are angry, but I have no idea why.
You're a people pleaser, Tommy, like I am.
Yeah.
I don't think Seth is so much of one of those.
When people can't view their reports, I don't care if they're happy.
What do you mean by people pleaser?
I work really hard to make sure people are happy. I like
That's our job.
Yeah, I mean,
isn't that everybody's job? Like,
yeah.
you want to make your customers happy, whether those are internal or external.
Maybe I just have an dose of empathy. Maybe I'm more empathetic than I should be.
Okay, if I am doing my job right, but no one's happy with me, do I still have a job next year? No way.
Dude, there are people who do this all day long. Like,
maybe back in when IT was IT.
You have people that you work with, you're like, these are grumpy people, and I can't stand work. Like, I don't go to them to get help because they're grumpy.
and then they don't have a job anymore, especially in the Power BI space. How many mean Power BI developers do you know that are good at what they do?
I mean, I find them,
and I want their names.
I don't necessarily work with them. I move on to other things. I mean, I'm
trying to figure out, like, what do you mean, like, by making people happy, right? Like,
well, so Myers-Briggs or whatever that is. There's like there's some personality tests, and I'm a very yellow personality or whatever.
Okay, all right, now we're talking.
So I like to sit down, like, how's your day? How are things going? I need to know a little bit about you first.
Right.
I don't need to be coming in and be like bull in a china shop and just be like, all right, what do we have to accomplish? What is the objective? Like, what is the list of hit things that we got to get done so everyone can get out of this room and back to their regular lives? I'm kind of more like, meh, like, I want people to be happy and enjoy, like, the I get in a car and I'll turn on music and I will drive for hours just enjoying the music. The journey is part of the trail for me. My wife, she's not that person at all. She loves getting in the car and getting there as fast as she possibly can because there's a destination. There's an objective. We got to hit the objective. And that's just not me. Maybe that's what I mean.
There are a couple things that have, like, that's not. I'm the complete opposite of that. But like there's a company you and I both used to work for that did one of the best things career-wise that I'd ever interacted with, which was run us through that personality.
It's like a disc,
training,
like a disc or something like that.
Yeah, it's like a disc, but they had Legos, right? Different colors, green,
the
yellow,
ones that Mike
red,
stole,
blue,
right?
The ones that I stole from all the employees who left.
But the best thing about those, like, and this is here's a Microsoft Teams thing, right? Like, if you could allow just a little whatever, I don't know, in the corner, show me disc, show me, green, yellow, blue, whatever. That helped me interact with my coworkers so much better, because I am the bullet guy. I'm like, all right, here's the agenda. Let's red blue was like tandem equality, and then like way underneath was green yellow. It's like, yes, I like getting things done when I want to talk. Like, I'm not the guy that sends the email that's like, "Good morning, Mike. How are you today? I hope you had a fantastic weekend." Like that in a paragraph of just fluff. I'm the guy that's like, "Mike, you had this deliverable. Where is it at?" Like,
yes.
But so like what you described with your wife is really funny too, because I think there was an analogy I heard along the way where two different people can go through the same experience and have completely different views of the experience.
Totally.
What Mike is outlining is it's a beautiful sunny day.
I got my music on. I'm really
75,
enjoying.
80 degrees.
Yep.
Maybe 90. Walking along the ocean beach, crashing waves. Like there is nothing more beautiful than the serene setting as he just spends hours walking down the beach.
Yep. Just lost in my mind. Just
I'm next to him walking.
Pissed that the sand is so hot.
No, all I can think about is I'm gonna get burned because I'm a ginger.
Yep.
Like I don't have enough sunscreen on. I'm gonna step on a shell. It's gonna cut the bottom of my foot. We're gonna be a half a mile away from the hotel. I'll never be able to get back.
These seagulls are coming too close to my head.
I'm not gonna go in the ocean. Look at like that person out there is right next to a jellyfish. There's gonna be a shark. They're gonna come along. I'm gonna have to dive in. And, like somebody's gonna die today. But it's just my wife and I talked about this exact scenario because she's kind of like Mike, kind of enjoys things a lot more than
just go along with the flow.
Can.
Yes.
So I don't know what color this fits in, but if I'm also on this said beach with you, I'm thinking to myself, how's no one talked about what we're eating tonight? Were we gonna? That will be my thought.
There's no color for there's no color for an Italian.
It's green, white, and red. It is interesting though. With you bring up a point going kind of back to the topic because we clearly trying to get through this one, guys.
I'm pretty sure you're yellow, Tommy. You're an extrovert.
I'm an extrovert, but I can also be very direct kind of thing. But with the dealing with the fires, right? It's usually either you find out about it, like where you have 18 emails from Microsoft or, hey, systems down, or you just report something failed, or people are letting you know. And it's very much that assessing the situation. This is kind at the after usually these fires, the kind of fun where I think you grow the most. They are the most stressful situation because it's almost like improv to me, where you're forced to react in a way where you have to go through like 5 different things in your head. And usually with the fires, they're not always the same actions. Maybe it's like the same methodology.
I'd agree.
But you're usually doing the same things where you're going like, okay, who's affected? What's affected? How long do I have? How long has it been down? And you're trying to set, and then it says like the priorities, which are, I don't know. Why are you smiling?
I'm smiling because I feel like this conversation went just like we were on the beach just a second ago. I'm sitting here enjoying the beach. Just
what are you doing when there's a fire going? That's the most beautiful colors.
You're enjoying the fire. You enjoyed when technology failed you completely.
Yeah.
No, I'm just enjoying the conversation that Seth we're having, and Tommy kind of like reined us really far back in because now we're talking about technology again.
No,
last time I checked.
I'm with you. It was a good segue.
Oh, okay. I was still drifting out into the beach.
So
you look at the Chicago fire, go, I love the colors. Like, goodness.
Hey, anybody got any marshmallows?
So
we do not endorse fires on the Explicit Measures podcast.
This ironically is kind of dialing back into like dumpster fires or technology.
Yeah.
Like when things fail, how do you cope?
Yep.
Right. So actually, I'm really interested because I think regardless of personality type, all of us take ownership of our areas very seriously in ensuring that our customers are happy with the product.
Agreed.
So when things go awry or multiple things go awry, how do you guys handle that? Tommy, you said you freak out a bit.
So when things go wrong for me, typically my solution to solving these things is usually I can work out on a solution. I mean, bar none. And a lot of times when things go awry, it's like I need to work harder. I get very tunnel vision on like major things that go wrong. Like something's not working, something's not loading, stuff goes down. I get very tunnel vision and focus on like, okay, we have to resolve this. And usually my answer is shed everything else. Again, because I'm a people pleaser to some degree, right? I want to make sure that the thing's working, get it done. Like, yes, I'll get it. We're going to work on it right away, jump right in. And I just go until I feel like the thing can be solved. And there's been very few things that I haven't been able to like engineer my way out of. But there are just some, unfortunate events where you're like, I'm just going to stand up to like 1, 2 in the morning, figuring out things to make it work and refreshing the data or whatever that may be. I guess that's maybe me. How about you guys?
So for me, it starts with 2 primary questions I have to answer. who's affected and what's the estimated timeline or expectations. Who's affected and expectations.
Sure.
And
I think the expectation management is a big part of this.
yeah, because and that's what I need to figure out first. Even if it's a range, I need to say, okay, who's the most affected by this? What applications? Like if it's a gateway,
Yep.
well, it's probably affecting some of our business applications, obviously affecting like, the reports. And then I'll do a few like kind of trees like are things working or they're just old or things not even loading. And then the next immediate thing is how do we manage the expectations? Like who do I need to manage? Okay, hey, leadership looks at this. This is obviously not broken. We need to let a message out now so we can curb their expectation. This is going to be, we're looking into it now. You'll hear the next update, da 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 da. Before I really start diving into how to solve it, like to me, I don't. It's hard not to go through that process every time with any technological fail or fire because like a house, which I'm finding out being a homeowner, it's never that simple. Like, yeah, we'll just fix the door. Oh, wait, the
Yeah.
rug is larger than the
Just
door, so
gonna
we need
pop
a new
off one
door.
tile.
Right?
Just
Yeah.
gonna pop off one
Oh
tile.
no.
You
Yeah.
I
reseat it,
literally had to tear
grout it.
like when we bought a house with there's no door in one of the rooms, so like we'll just buy a door, standard door. Well, guess what? There were 3 rugs on the floor there that they glued, so we actually had to saw off and 2 inches of the door so it could close.
Oh my
To me,
goodness.
this is
Yeah.
I have other horror stories, but technology can fall into that
Did you buy
same.
a solid color door or a hollow?
You're gonna have to ask my wife. I cook.
If it's hollow,
Eh,
you would have cut off the bottom and had no bottom anymore.
then solid.
This probably was
Then
solid.
solid. Absolutely solid. Then so glad we know that now. Um, but to me, it's like expectations have to be managed right away. The
Hmm.
sooner the better, and then it's trying to get the timeline. So that's where I start.
I like that idea. I think that's a really strong solution for like when, and I mean, I think not every company has a good routine like that of being able to
Right.
notify people. I definitely do think the more you become centralized in the governance piece, you need some level of regular
Yeah.
communication around those things. Like there's an expectation that, and again, we've talked a lot about governance and things, right? When we talk about those data sets that are highly regulated,
Mm-hmm.
potentially, right? There's a central team owning it. It's that governed piece to it. That SLA portion of that is what needs to be clearly communicated. I don't know if you guys caught it, but on Twitter recently, Alex Dupler was working out something with it seemed like it was like a time based refreshing cycle on a he built a custom visual. He used a neb to do it. He threw out a random question. He
Oh,
said,
I think I saw this.
yeah, he's I have 0 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours, 96 hours, something like that. So it's kind of like a time scale, right? And so every time the report would refresh, he'd be able to capture how old or how stale the data was based
Oh,
on the
really?
time of when you looked at the report. So he'd have a measure that kind of like increased in size. So he built a measure in the reverse order so that way the timer would kind of burn down and the color would change based on like how stale
That's
the
cool.
data was, and so he actually had. I thought it was a really interesting scenario, but the same thing, right? There's some thought put into when was it refreshed? Is it in process, or is it out? Is it stale enough that we need to actually go do something to it? And so I thought
Mm-hmm.
that was a
Yeah.
really good way or good scenario of him putting like a visual on top of how stale the data was and communicating through that meter. Hey, we're actively working on trying to resolve the issue. There's a
Right.
problem with this. Be aware if you're looking at the data, there's an issue.
There's a couple. I like the direction we're going. And there's one other side one I think I'll hit towards the end. But I think overall, when something goes really bad, communication is the thing that no matter how um, enlightening to the business, like you may feel personally responsible. You can't think about it that way because you have to think about like what is happening in the current moment.
Right.
Okay, gather the thoughts enough to clearly articulate what's going on. And you can take the podcast, right? For example, right? It's
Yep.
not like we just left users in the dark after about
Right.
5 minutes. We're like, hey, we got an issue. Hey, Mike's thing crashed again. Hey, like
It's really
and
dying.
just you keep people in the loop so that they feel part of something as opposed to nothing happens, everybody drops, and 20 minutes later you say something like, hey, no podcast today.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
Right.
but even within an organization, um as it relates to the leadership, and you touched on 2 points, but I'm going to hit 3 which I
Okay.
think correlate to some of what you were saying, Tommy. And I'm not going to claim ownership of these ideas. This was actually a great thing I learned from my boss, who's
Mm,
a great mentor in to me as it relates to how do I interact with leadership. So if things go way south, right, and that could be a gateway failing, there's a business impact, especially, right? There's three things he's drilled into my head. What are we seeing, right? Like we gateways are down, like 100%. What is the action we're taking, right? And within there, you can set expectations of
mm,
timeline if we know that, like etc. And what is the impact? What's the impact to the business by this being down? Gateways. That means nothing's refreshing, right? Um, Reports are down. That means nobody's accessing reports. Pipelines failed. It means there's no fresh data, right? Like those are the impacts that communicating throughout the organization is important because you don't know how many people are relying on certain things, but other people might. And it's an opportunity for them to get out in front of that conversation with customers, whether it's internal or external,
Mm.
because it allows them to say, oh, hey, initiative taken. These two or three people I'm reaching out to right away because I know that they log in 100 times per day
right.
and they rely on this report. So I'm going to reach out and proactively say, hey, we have a challenge. It looks like there's an issue with something in the technical space. The team is saying that they expect to have it up by noon today.
Mhm.
Crisis averted, as opposed to the opposite of that, where you're not communicating. You're trying to do all this stuff under the radar, and you don't know how much frustration is building on the other side of that, and it's going to result in bugs, people getting upset, fire, even more fire drills on top of the one that you're already dealing with.
And there comes a point, like, if you don't communicate those things become escalated beyond your
Right.
Yeah.
level of hierarchy in the company, right? Because
Yeah.
now you're talking like some CEO gets involved, or two levels up get involved and say, "Hey, we're
Sure.
director levels." Their directors start talking to your directors, and then it comes back down to you. And there's nothing worse than like, "Hey, Mike, did you know your data's not refreshing? Something's all broken here." Like, "Oh, I didn't know." Like, okay, it's
Hmm.
in production. Like, we got to know these things.
Yeah.
So, like,
And
where does that come from?
and at the same time, though, we're talking about some very blanket statements where we catch it first, and that's not always the case.
Nope.
I
True.
would love to have a percentage of when someone else notifies us, like this. Hey, I'm not seeing this report, or because like a gateway failing is pretty dead simple to kind of figure out, like like in terms of what it affects. But there's either all these other use cases or scenarios where sometimes it's just a single report, or it's something on Microsoft's end. Those little things where some people are affected for something that is not necessarily, like you get an email saying Microsoft's down, which is pretty easy to manage expectations. So that gray area that unfortunately for us seems to be a lot of those issues where it's like someone inputted a text field into the customer ID. Therefore, any table is affected by that. But in order to find that out, usually it's down a rabbit hole. So there's that the action side of that. And Seth, I need to say, like, I love those three things and kind of internalizing that for any situation almost, but especially for the fire drills and making sure that's applied. I think that sounds like something very universal that should be done. So I will definitely be taking that with me in my podcast suitcase that I have now. So, which is already pretty darn full. But what those situations where we don't know the action right away, like I said, that is a lot of times the case. So take that same three actions or the conversation we have here, where someone's just coming up to you going, "Hey, this is not loading," and where do you guys kind of begin your, let's say, your course of action and then investigation, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, typically it's going to depend on the severity of the issue, right?
Mm,
Like, and that's where sometimes even with these three things, like you get hung with what are we seeing? We don't know what the
mm-hmm,
action is. Like, we don't know how we're going to fix this. So the immediate action is we'll give an update every 2 hours until we understand like what the
mm,
problem is
Yep.
and and how we think we can resolve it, and then we'll give you an estimated timeline on when we think it'll be done, right? So technically you could do like a, here's what I'm seeing, and the impact is we're screwed until we fix it. Right.
Yep.
I'll let you like, and then it's intermittent communication until you identify, and then can guarantee when you think it's going to be completed, and then you notify people when you've got it up and running again.
I think that's a good approach, and I think when you're communicating there's an issue, it's a good idea to expect a, hey, I will, when you're, again, I'm thinking like these are like hypercare moments, right? These are things where people are relying upon your data. This is part of a very, touch, high touch situation, right? We're stopping everything else we're doing. We're focusing on this. We're going to resolve this issue. I definitely think it's very helpful. Microsoft, when they do their response things, we kind of mirror what they do, right? So they have got a pretty well defined system there.
Really?
That's what. Well, that's what they do. They provide, if there's a
not
down,
when you submit a ticket, Seth.
It's difference between tickets.
I mean,
and
if there's a major outage, I would agree with you.
When their Azure Active Directory went down, that's what they did. They said it's down.
That's a massive outage.
I'm just saying though, but
hundreds of millions of people go to. That doesn't happen all the time.
Doesn't happen all the time. But their pattern to do that is, hey, this thing went down. We'll update. An update will come in 4 hours. If they get nothing done in those 4 hours, they don't know what the root cause. Yeah. They at least say, hey, look, we've spent 4 hours on this thing. We still can't figure out what it is. We think it's here.
Triaged, right?
We're still triaging it. There's at least an update coming. We're still doing something. It's not like it's in the ether of like Neverland. Like someone actually is actioning on it. So, heads are rolling. But I mean, I like that idea. I think it's important to communicate. You've acknowledged the issue. We're looking into it, and then here's our next update. Will come in 3 hours. This is when we're going to say another update of where we're at with things, and you got to do it.
You did bring up an interesting point there before, Tommy. Like the business brings you the problem, right? And that's where a little retro after these is good, because if those are activities of monitoring or putting alerting around your pipelines or something that could have been preventable, like those are the opportunities to be like, yep, this is my tech debt thing that I'm going to add in, because we need to make sure that this sort of thing may happen again, but we're identifying it before somebody else is telling us it's the problem.
And those kind of things too, right? You need to log those things to some degree, because that becomes into, like, we've had a whole episode around what technical debt looks like. You may have a lousy process. Something got built early on, or something has changed, or you're bringing in
MVP made it to prod. What?
Still pulling data for prod out of Excel files. What? But those are things that you
certified.
You put those in the backlog, and you come back, and that those become opportunities to come back to leadership and say, look, we do need to stop development of new things, or we can only do development of one new thing. We need to step back and fix this other thing. This problem has occurred multiple times. This is going to continually be an impact and slow us down if we don't fix this.
Yeah. Why does marketing have access to be able to edit customer information or account information, and they're inputting the wrong information, like a data type in the wrong place?
I can't fix.
So I can't fix that.
Yeah. Well, yes. Yeah. No, we're listing out without having more controls around what they can enter or not enter.
Yeah.
But you're
I don't know how they did it, but they put a free input in a drop down, and now it broke everything. So, but it happens. But then that affects there's that dependency tree. No, I think there's always going to be cases where people reach out to us, and I think you can always log stuff. But if you are dealing with hundreds of tables or hundreds of reports, and again, it's been great with the GitHub community with people using the Scanner API, and people are like, hey. So I got 1,000 workspaces and 10,000 reports. So it's kind of failing on me sometimes. So, but if you have that, you can't have like the email alert, right? For each one of those, get sent to some like a repository for your whole team. So there's obviously that prioritization, like what is most important to the business? What reports? Like if these fail, we need to know right away. So we need to set up some automation.
Yep.
If this fails, then it's going to affect ability to load our business apps, our power apps, or so we need to be on top of this. Everything else, so to speak, it can be notified by someone else, and then we can start that other process. But we have a set of systems where we have our priority items or entities that if it does fail, like we have to have that alert us first.
Yeah. Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah. And then the next part of all this, which is honestly my favorite, if it wasn't a fire, is the investigation.
I
If I
love
didn't,
troubleshooting.
yeah,
It's probably one of my most fun aspects of technology in general. Just data and I'm pretty good at it. Like figuring out root cause issues and explaining or solving them. Like I love obtuse like gateway issues or just random got to go on a rabbit trail kind of things that solve problems. It's fun.
unfortunately, we're always on a time crunch and it's a fire.
Well,
It's like I love baseball except
hey,
playing in a burning field.
whatever.
Like,
Well, I think I mean, another way I phrase this a lot is, especially when I was in the engineering space, it was around, what is the root cause? What was the root cause of
Right.
mhm.
whatever the issue was? And then, so I think it's very valuable here to talk like about when you're doing these reviews on things, you're talking about what is the root cause analysis? How do we get down to that very basic level? What was causing the problem? And I think sometimes I've been in organizations where the root cause is never really teased out. And so it's much harder for you to like fix that moving forward because you just kind of throw a band-aid on something like, oh, the blank field, this record was coming in with blanks. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll filter it out and we just move on. And like we don't understand like, well, why was the field returning blanks? Was there something wrong in the system? Was someone giving us bad data? Because at least that way you have a little bit more ammunition of saying, well, the other system we're getting information out of, there's a problem there that also might need to be fixed. So you're gonna, yeah, I think there's just a good point about
It's
getting
a
to the root cause.
it's a really good point because just because of fast fix, typically the fast fix is the one that just stays.
Yep,
And
exactly.
you have to be really cautious about that because especially in reporting,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, man, we can cover over a multitude of business
Bad things.
sins.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
should you? No. Right? Like many
Mm-hmm.
times not. Like that's where down the road, all of a sudden somebody hits the view or the store procedure or some business logic transformation, and they're like, why are there like 30 different conditions in
Yes.
here that are
Yes.
like stripping things out? Like, what if I just clean this up? And you're like, no, you just unwound 2 years of people being like, there's this random thing that shouldn't be happening in our source system. Like, we'll go fix it. No, you just take it out of the report. Look, okay. Why
But
does this perform so horribly? Well, because we're doing 30 case statements or, like whatever the
exactly.
case may be.
And then I think that's part of the point here too, to some degree, is like when you're talking about like cleansing data is very difficult, and knowing how to do that in a repeatable way, I think, is kind of challenging to some degree. I mean, you could have a lot of
100%.
information, you have a lot of business rules around making that
Mhm.
data good for the reports. So
Yeah.
managing that is kind of unwieldy at that point.
Well, and it makes it so hard to troubleshoot too, or like to even begin that process of that
Yep.
decision tree that you kind of
Yep.
mentally do, where it's like, is it the user? We've had issues where it's that person's computer's cookies, you know what I mean? Or like multiple people, for whatever reason, Microsoft put a cookie in, and 5 people who happened to look that day. This is a true story. Like, they could not load Microsoft like the report because some cookies were, and I'm like, and I was like, can you just try this for me? And it was like, then we had to send this notification out to the whole company saying, notice if you use Microsoft Power BI in the last 2 weeks, please clear your cookies before accessing this report. Like, and those
Wild.
little weird things, like
That's crazy.
yeah, and like you can't really blame the user,
Nope.
because it's just one of those. You're dealing. I think we say this. You're dealing with technology. It is not straightforward. They make it easy looking, but there's a
Well,
whole
that's where
yeah.
experience comes in,
Yeah.
man. Right? Like it's those really whack, obscure cases that when everything's making sense, but it's still broken,
Mm.
that you're like, all right, different realm, and you flip into this like, maybe we just need to reboot something.
Yeah.
Like clear all the things that's not going to nuke whatever. But
This
yeah,
is
like
funny. This is
browser
going,
issue. If
yeah.
you've ever done software application though, like
Totally. You've run
dude,
into this.
so many browser issues and like random weird things depending on what people are using or yeah,
Code is hard to do. There's so many
Yeah.
edge case, like I remember when I was developing stuff for iPhone and iPhone and Android applications. I loved working on iPhone or Apple products because they had a much lower threshold for variation across their product line. Their products were very set. Here's the phone. it comes in these 4 sizes. These are the ones that we support. You only have to build your app for 4 or 5 screens. Yeah, it's kind of complex. But then when you flip over the world to like the Android side, there's like thousands of screens, and you're like, well, how do you support all these things? It's crazy. You can't support every single one. You have to kind of like pick like, okay, what is the most common devices that are out there and kind of support them and figure out hopefully the rest of it still just works.
This is I'll let you go, Seth, because this is going to a lot of our previous conversations, I'm realizing.
Well, I wanted to throw a curveball here, right? Like
Batter up.
we've been talking about business, fire drills, technology failing, how do we cope with it?
Yep.
How what are some techniques that you guys have developed over the years related to dealing with technology failures during presentations?
Ooh.
This is where I thought we were going originally, and I'm looking forward to this part of the conversation.
Right before that, I want to mention, not necessarily conversation.
It's a curveball. Don't whiff it. All right, go ahead. What do you got as the last one?
I just find it interesting. This conversation's leading to some of our previous things we talked about, where how important is a college education, where I think half of this, there's no way any of this is learned in school. Like, hey, why don't you ask the person to restart the computer? Or look at Microsoft support site. Like, it's a lot of this is experience. And we talked about what makes a good Power BI Pro. I just find this all very interesting that a lot of it's playing to, like, yeah, there's definitely skills in here, but a lot of this is just experience where I didn't know that could happen. And now I do.
I think some of it is like learned experience, but I mean, on the other hand too, like I pull a lot from my engineering background of like how I learned to do certain things there, and there's a lot of repeatable. I mean, I do data science kind of things, and granted, it's different than engineering. I mean, it's definitely its own kind of field of study by itself, but like there's a lot of very similar concepts that bridge both worlds there. So, but I'm with you, Tommy. I think a lot of this stuff is learned. I think there's again, I think what has changed for me in my world, just the last comment to that before we come to back to Seth's curveball, the internet has leveled the playing field, I think, for a lot of people. And when I look at like what you can learn on your own without needing a college education, go get some training. There's a lot of free content out there. Get involved. You can do a ton of stuff without having to go spend a dime anymore.
But this stuff is
so. But you the point you're bringing, it elicits another idea from me, which is when we're interviewing people or we're talking to people, it's not your book knowledge. It's not that you know how to do something. Yeah. What we're drilling into is, did you actually do it?
Yeah.
Did you actually go through and build this thing? Because if you did, you're going to be able to speak to the level of pain in the butt certain things are.
Yes.
Or you've lived through that experience of learning, and that is the difference, I think, between like college experience or learning something. It's actually practically doing that.
Yes.
And what I think we bring to the table is many years of getting, like slamming your head against a wall to figure out these problems that sometimes occur.
Yeah.
But even us talking about them, somebody's not going to be able to like, oh, refresh, I'm gonna like next time I'm gonna know. Like, no, because there's specific situations that you've had experience in that allow you to understand when some of those full nuclear options could be the problem, right? But we hammer on like learning and whatnot, but it is doing. It's doing that is what
I broke a
you
coffee mug
really
once.
gain value. Congratulations.
Because which immediately made me not as angry about the situation because my wife was right next to me. She's like, anyway, I didn't throw it; it just hit. But I'm obviously okay. Let me tell the story.
That's all right. That's all right. We're good. We'll just let it be. It's all right. You broke a coffee mug.
About demos,
Life is
right,
there.
guys?
Okay.
Yeah, like you give a presentation, and what happens?
Oh man!
But
have you ever? First thing, have you ever had massive failures during a presentation?
Oh yes, I have definitely. I have definitely. DAX is one of the things that are kind of tricky. If you don't know what you're writing in DAX, you can screw up a lot of things, and it just won't work. And I've tried to been like, it's usually where I'm on the. If I have my normal playbook of what I'm trying to teach through DAX, stuff works. I have my point. I'm gonna put my DAX statement together. I've already tested it. It works. I do that and it works. It's when people give me like the other questions, like, well, what happened if you would do X, Y, Z, or I want to calculate something like this. I'm like, oh yeah, it's no problem. You just do it like this, and I'm like, fail. Like it's just like you're like, well, Google SQL BI, they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But usually it's like a follow up kind of thing. I had to like I didn't have the right context or what you're looking for, or the data wasn't right, and so I've definitely botched some DAX demos pretty bad, and had to like come back with a final solution. Hey, I'll email you later
Yeah.
what the right solution is.
Well,
I'll think it out and write it out for you, because it's kind of hard on the spot to do those kind of things.
Sure.
Well, you're talking about two different kinds of failures, where you have the technological fail, and I wouldn't consider that the DAX one a technological fail. That's more of a demo fail. It's kind of the coding's the application. Where we, in my case, it's like literally in Houston, I was doing a demo and my computer, newly upgraded to Windows 11, crashed.
Oh yeah, I
It
remember
froze,
that.
and it was like, well, that's great timing. And kind of to your point, where you're not just like, hold on, like
It gets so
maybe,
awkward in the room. Like whenever you're
yeah,
doing something like that and you
right,
have to like wait for your computer to start up, you don't ever know how long a computer takes to start up until
right.
you're in a room with people staring at you and the computer is not happy. That
I
3.5 minutes is a long time.
Yeah. Ironically enough, I said this is why you need a good data model, because it was about standard data models, and it just about like having the back. Anyways, but yeah, but the DAX one too. It's like someone asks a question, you kind of pivot, or you're just not in the groove, so to speak. There are two very different use cases there.
I would agree with that.
100%. But I like to Mike, to your point, you're dialed in. Demos always there's always challenges with demos, which is why they're fun and or not fun depending on your presentation style. But I would like there's just a heightened, your brain is on a different wavelength when you're in front of a bunch of people,
I
right?
think so.
And those problems that you could easily decipher on your own, you're just not thinking about,
No.
like
Mhm.
in general, right?
You're
Because
correct.
you have the whole spectrum of your presentation, the things that you're trying to convey, the very realization that it's not working the way it should, and all those just amp up the stress levels to the point where,
Yep.
yeah, you can talk around those things.
You miss very simple mistakes.
Yeah,
You're like,
right.
you missed a comma somewhere, or there's a
A
parenthesis
great
missing.
a great way
Yeah.
to do that, a great way to mitigate through that though is like ask the audience, right? Depending on if you've developed a repertoire with the audience,
That's
or
true.
that's kind of your style, that
Yep.
it's an option. I guess some of the things I'll bring up like kind of lead back to like what are the things I used to do when I started presenting,
Mhm.
right? Because you have to plan for a technology failure.
Mhm.
You have to assume
Yes.
worst case scenario when you're
Yep.
presenting. And until you've got a lot of presentation experience under your belt, it's better to over prepare just in case.
Yep.
Because the worst thing that happens, and I've seen it, is they didn't prepare for it, and your presentation, like the 40 or 50-minute session you went to, ends after 15 minutes.
Mhm.
And then you're dead in the water because you're not going to join another session, so you just lost 45 minutes as an attendee. And that's kind of like the worst case scenario, right, from a presentation
I would agree.
standpoint. So like what I would do is a couple things. If you have a demo failure or something like glitches a little bit, like always have some questions for the audience,
Mhm.
right? Like, hey, so and so, tell me about this and this, or what your experience is with something. And it's great if it's a small enough room or there's a mic, and then you can have kind
Yeah.
of some dialogue going on instead of just standing up on a stage and feeling really awkward. If
Yep.
you don't break that tension, it will be really awkward, right? Like an audience is just as nervous or uncomfortable as you are as a presenter.
That's
The other
such a
the
good
other
point.
thing I would say is there are definitely things you can do to like mitigate that. Like I always had three different things. Like, and you'll laugh, but I had a paper copy of my presentation just so I could speak to it. Like I
Mhm.
may not be able to show slides, but at least my flow wouldn't be disrupted because I could still speak to things. I could amp up the description of what would be on the slide and work through that. And I've seen some presenters do that with maximum effect. And you would, like, you didn't miss a thing. Just because you couldn't see a slide didn't matter because
Mhm.
they just kept going. But they had their reference material.
Correct.
I would back up on a OneDrive, and when I first started, I'd carry two laptops so
Mhm.
that if I needed to, I could spool up the other laptop. It was already prepped. It was already had like all of the presentation material set up the same way. But like, not everybody can carry around 2 laptops and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time,
Yep.
like, what are the ways in which, if things were to totally fail, how would you recover? And what would you do while you were recovering? Are the things I think that give you a lot more comfort on stage, but at the same time, realize that it like technology fails are periodically just the bane of
The way it is.
anybody's existence. But for some reason, like it always hits at least one presenter in every conference I've been in.
Oh, totally. And so another one of these, I like your scenarios there. I like the ideas of having 2 laptops, 1 backup drive. A lot of times I'll be doing demos of like Charticulator or Deneb or like visuals or things that I can pre-build. So a lot of times what I'll do when I ever have presentations, particularly in Power BI Desktop, I'll build the thing that I wanted to produce and like put it on another page and hide it.
Yeah.
And so I have a lot of this like, it's kind of like the baking shows, right? I'm going to put all the ingredients together and then I'm going to pull out the baked thing that I've already prepared.
Final product.
The final product. And so that's another technique that I've used a couple times. If I can't build what I'm trying to build verbatim for whatever reason, and again, this is also kind of hard to handle when you have, the Power BI Desktop and or these other tools. They're also updating. So something where you thought it was may no longer be there or have been deprecated or like it just happens. So there are times when I just, like, okay, we're just gonna have to just roll with it. And I always have this baked version of whatever we're trying to produce somewhere else. That way it's kind of already there and ready to go in case something goes awry. I can't load the visual. It doesn't work. We can always fall back on that designed or completed object.
And with the baked version, which I absolutely love, and I think if there's anything anyone listening would take away, it's cooking related.
Like
make sure. Here's the analogy, and I know you're going to berate me for this,
it's
but
like
make sure you can.
It's like making pasta with a bad egg, and the noodles don't come out. Yeah, right.
Make sure you can still eat. That's the thing. You may.
There you go.
So even if you're like, well, I don't know what happened here, kind of things, like, well, good thing I have, and I depending on the demo, I'll have like 3 versions of where I'm at, kind of thing, where I'm like, rather than the final version, it's like, well, good thing I had the dough in the fridge, kind of thing.
That takes a lot of time.
It does. Well, if you do the demo, just save as at different points.
Yes, correct.
Where it's like, this is my query load, this is my relationship, I'm at this phase, kind of thing.
Yeah,
and that is a lot of work.
I've done that a lot with. That's another great technique when you're doing like full pre-con sessions, when you like start teaching people how to do things.
Right.
I will build the content and then I will walk through. And I used to just build it all and just expect everyone else to kind of follow along. And if you got stuck, we'd stop and fix you. But that took so much time to get that done. So now what I do, especially when I'm teaching classes, is I run through all the content and I go to like a break point. Here's the first lesson, and then I'll save off that version, and then I'll just keep walking through my documentation, and then I'd save another one. Yeah. So I have like these snapshots or these milestones throughout the presentation where each milestone is a saved version of a file. That way, if someone's like totally like got the wrong data, nothing's working, it's just not happy, they can always open up an existing file and catch up really quickly.
Exactly.
And now they're another good starting point to keep going on with the rest of the class.
Because even if you're in the baked cake scenario, if you're only 20% done, you're like, here's the final thing, that doesn't help. So I may have like 4 or 5 different versions. Because it's not hard if you go through your demo once, go, okay, this is a good point.
Yeah, save.
And also that helps you with your own. Save as.
Yeah, like
but
that.
That also is kind of a side effect where it kind of helps you break down your demo.
Yes.
One thing to assess point about engaging the audience. This is a whole other part of it's amazing we're giving all this content away for free, by the way. This is some awesome content here. Just saying. I'm just saying.
It's a hidden episode, man. It's got to be good.
The beauty
you got to look for this.
The beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Some people maybe say this is junk. I don't know.
Oh man. But no, well, the idea of engaging the audience, right, where they're only as confident as you are too. So this is part skill, but very much part experience, where you have to know if people are relaxed too. And I'm very much going way back to the beginning of this conversation. I may be in between you guys, but I'm a very alert to people's like demeanors, kind of thing. Like if someone's kind of looking at me like, Like it can break me. So if you kind of sense the audience of like, or just like they're laughing with you or whatever, and when those demos break,
or at you,
one thing, yeah, yeah, throwing things. But what I try to do before any, even if it's a demo or not a demo, but what helps is engage them early. Don't engage them for the first time if it breaks.
Yeah.
Like would be like
Nope.
5-10 minutes
Agreed.
before the conference.
100%.
Like, where are people from, kind of thing, or just to get people a little loose. So when that break, it's not like So what if something broke for you and everyone's like, I didn't think this was a dialogue, where they already
Yeah.
feel comfortable to talk.
But I think
Yeah,
you can do that. Like, we should probably do a different episode on this one.
yeah,
But like, like knowing your audience is kind of a cliche statement. But if you can build a repertoire,
yeah.
not a not a repertoire, a rapport with the audience right from the get go, you win, right?
Mhm.
Because then these types of things, they don't look at you like, oh man, this is the most awkward thing in the world, and that person is like, I feel
Right,
uncomfortable for that person on
right,
stage right now, because you're relating to them, like they're
right.
learning something from you.
You're human
Like
too,
if
kind
you
of thing.
yeah, if you nail that kind of interaction, and sometimes that's questions answer, people responding, like some speakers do really well with like people randomly shooting out questions, some hate it, right? Because it messes with their flow. But both of those types of speakers can still have a great interaction with the audience as long as the audience is keyed in. But to your point, yeah, part of like being a good presenter is being having empathy, recognizing, looking in the audience, and if people are like, oh, man, like,
Pivot,
like
change
I'm
what you're doing.
losing
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
What do I got to do, right? Or like the guy in the front row who's just like sweating bullets with eyes wide open because your computer just crashed,
Right.
right? Like that's not a good sign. Like like reading your audience is something I think you're bringing up, right? Which is
Yeah.
something we
And
should always be doing.
it'll be
part of
interesting
it,
when we go
yeah,
back to live events because I haven't done a live events in a long
A
time.
long time.
So it'll be interesting to see when that starts happening and how I haven't done a presentation to a live event group in
that
quite a
this,
while. It's been
yeah,
all online at this point for the last 2
this
years.
was so the hardest thing
Talking
when
to
we
a
started. Yeah,
camera. Like,
Yeah, and you
yeah,
two goofballs.
yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's been easier. Like when we started the Chicago user group, and we would do teams, and I would be down in my basement, like at 8 p.m.
yeah.
And I'm like, I feel like I'm doing conspiracy theories, like about toothpaste, kind of thing. Because I'm like, who am I talking to? And it was said there, how many people on. So that interaction, it's the hardest thing to miss.
I'll, I want
Yeah.
to throw your point there, Tommy. I like that point a lot. When you're by yourself, only presenting with only your
Yeah.
camera, it definitely changes the dynamic. Being able to
Mhm.
present with somebody else with you, whether they're producing it or helping out, has been a huge game changer for me. And when I present with other people, I really like having the ability to have multiple personalities,
Faces.
videos, cameras, faces, whatever you want to call, kind of together. And I think, one of the things that Seth and I do a lot is we do a lot of co-presenting, right? We would
Mhm.
go to an event, we would present things together. So Seth
Yeah.
would do a portion of it, I would do a portion of it. Seth hated my portion because I was always so unprepared. Seth was always way more prepared than I was. So it just kind of like, but it was
It worked.
great because
Always worked out.
it always worked out because when one of us would falter, we could observe what was happening. We would
And
catch
absorb.
we would absorb the
Hmm.
mistake and give the other
Yeah.
person space to figure out what they were trying to talk about, and the
Mhm.
other person can jump in with like letting the void not just be silence. And that's, again, you can't always go into every presentation, every conference, and have two
Yeah.
speakers for every single thing, but that was really helpful. And if you can, it's great to have a co-presenter with you in certain topics because it really, everything we do with like Greg, I've done a couple events with Steve Campbell. They do the presentation and I can say, hey, I got a couple questions, or hey, can you explain to me a little bit more here at this one area? And it allows them to take a breath, collect some thoughts, take a drink of whatever, and then go deeper or answer that question. It makes it a little bit more fluid, I
Yeah.
feel like.
I don't remember who gave me this tip either. I know it was one of you two, but what happened when I first did the goals demo, I failed miserably. It was the Chicago one. I didn't click on the right thing. I was trying to really figure my way around, and I had you guys on, but I was just struggling to try to pivot. And it was like one of those, like, you just either weren't on your game, like you just couldn't get the ball in. And I think one of you said like you always have a picture up of someone you know on like not necessarily on the computer. So
Yep.
I started putting a picture up when I do presentations now
Yep.
of like my daughter or my wife just to see like a smile, kind of just to see a face. And it's amazing
I've gone,
how
yeah.
yeah.
I think it was me because I went through
Yeah.
It wasn't me.
I went through some training sessions, and one of the techniques they use when you're talking to a large audience is when you're looking at an audience, focus on a person, talk out your point to that person. Don't make it so long that it's awkward, and then transition your
Mhm.
look or your gaze to another
Yeah,
person and
that I do.
finish the thought. But
Yeah.
that is a very like intentional thing, and
Right.
it's a learned behavior because it helps you remove those stutter stop words of
Mhm.
like the ands and the ums and the you can finish the thought is you can if you transition too quickly you lose that context and your mind kind of
Yeah.
does that pausing every so often. You're like, okay, I got to keep
Right.
thinking about what I'm doing now. There's too much going on. So for me that works really
Yeah.
well for me. So I have a camera that has a screen on it and I can talk to myself essentially, but at least I'm looking at someone, they're reactive, I can see my face, I can see what's going on there. It helps me keep my thoughts together for longer periods of time.
Yeah. And and I absolutely love that regardless if things fail or not, but I think especially the other part too is I don't know if you guys do this, but and it's not in every use case, but when something does break, instead of thinking, "Oh no, something broke," I try to think, "How can I use this to my advantage?" Like obviously try to figure out the issue,
Mm-hmm.
but what can you do? Does it relate to the presentation? Were you talking about DAX? And it's like, hey, you know what? This is actually really common in DAX when you try to do this. This is why debugging is so important. The yada 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 kind of thing. Or if your computer breaks, to try to say like, what does that have to do with my conversation? How can I use this?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of times it's the old adage where people would complain about, I think it was Delta Airlines, and they would say, my flight got delayed. And they did a study that when Delta would respond to them, people had a higher satisfaction rating for Delta than people who didn't have a problem. So when Delta said, "We're sorry to hear that. Hey, what can we do for you? Contact us here or message us here on Twitter." Those people actually ended up feeling more strongly or more positive about Delta than people who didn't have a flight delay,
Mm-hmm.
which is incredible. And it's that power of okay,
Engagement.
use this, yeah, engagement.
Mm-hmm.
So both those things for fires for me have been a huge thing. Now, I don't mind always do the best job of what topic I get into, but at least at one, you're not just going, hold on, guys, hold on. Just trying to say, yeah, this is almost part of it. See, this is what happens. So I don't know. Do you guys think that way at all?
I think that becomes easier the more presenting you've done, where you can pick up where you left off or where
Mm-hmm.
things went awry. Um, on I do a lot of pre-planning, right? So
Mm-hmm.
before and like to Mike's point, it's been a while to going in front of a live audience, but
Yeah.
um, I actively run through scenarios in my head where what if things break? Like what are my next steps? Because one of the key important parts for me anyway, or any presenter I guess, is until you get really comfortable with transitioning from like, oh crap,
Mm-hmm.
I was just presenting, now I have to deal with this stuff while also carrying an audience because they're here to learn something and I still have that goal in mind.
Yeah.
If you haven't thought about it at all, you'll hit that and you'll just be like deer in headlights
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
because you have to fix something that you lose context of the audience, what you're trying to do. A minute feels like an hour, the whole 9 yards, versus, oh crap, my machine just turned off. I've thought about this before. I know what my next 5 steps are. And while I'm doing like, so that gives me a level of comfort to go take actions on something
Agreed.
while
Right.
transitioning to a state where I can get back into the mode of like finishing out the presentation.
Presentation. Yeah. I think a lot of times when things go wrong for me, it's a lot of like transition to other interesting facts or notes or
Hmm.
ask questions, let the machine figure its thing out, pause, engage that, take that time to engage with the audience. So I think these are good talking points. Honestly, I think we should go back and say, what are those audience warm up questions? What do we use to warm up the
That would be
audience?
great.
That would be a good episode right there. I'll have to write that one down at some point. So I think we've done it again. We were hoping this was going to be like a 30-minute episode, and here we are at full
It's
hour in.
impossible for us to do
We
under an
can't.
hour
We
now.
When we started the podcast, we're like, we'll just do short little 30-minute episodes. It'll be no problem. We got too many words.
We have problems yelling at each other. And we're hitting an hour. We're hitting an hour.
We're like, shut it down. Shut it down.
Yeah, all right.
Pull the plug.
Just one more point.
The best part, Seth and I, right before they're going, I am so tired. We are doing a short one, getting out of here.
Yeah, it's been a long one day of the week.
It just speaks to you guys how much I enjoy you guys so much.
Awesome. Well, with that, we thank you very much for listening to the podcast. We'll kind of wrap this one up. Thank you for finding hidden episode number 84. We're going to hide this one. We're not going to publicize it at all. We'll just kind of throw it out there sneakily and see what happens and see what people find out about it. Anyways, thank you all very much. Our only ask as you engage with the podcast is if you like the content here, if you think it's engaging, you like what we're talking about, please just share it with somebody else. Tweet it, send it out on LinkedIn, let people know that you enjoyed the podcast, and give us a thumbs up or a like on some of the social media platforms that we do this on. And it just helps us kind of keep going and doing it better. Tommy, where else can you listen to the podcast if you're not actually watching it after the fact here on YouTube?
I really wish we had an Easter egg in here. Like the code word is "Let's go Yankees" or something.
Oh my gosh!
So and then I will send you something. I don't know. Anyways, you can find the podcast anywhere they're available. You can and listen on Apple, Spotify, Overcast, Google Podcasts, Spotify again, Anchor, all these great platforms. Make sure to leave us a rating, subscribe to the podcast,
yes,
leave
please.
us a 5-star rating. Really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to know when future episodes are, listen or subscribe to Power BI Tips on LinkedIn and YouTube, and you'll know our future episodes Tuesdays and Thursdays. Thank you guys.
Awesome. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.